today liability is king. It is no longer necessarily just about the cybersecurity. Even if you're in an industry that's not regulated, this actually still applies. And then when something goes wrong, you know quickly how to get that addressed versus having to scramble.
Welcome to The Growth Switch, the podcast where we explore the strategies, struggles, and breakthroughs of bold business leaders. I'm your host, Jules Fox, growth strategist and lead content creator at Aries Media. I'm here to uncover how today's top brands are scaling, overcoming challenges, and unlocking sustainable success. Now, for those of you just tuning in, Aries Media helps grow successful brands with comprehensive hands-on support for sales, business development, and performance marketing. Go ahead and drop growth into the comments if you want to learn how to do that. Today, we are fortunate enough to have David Levine on the podcast. He's a highly respected cybersecurity leader, and he's the founder and CEO of ResTech Solutions, where he advises businesses on proactive strategies to mitigate risk, address liability, and navigate the evolving landscape of cybersecurity threats and regulations. There's some brand new stuff that we're excited to hear about. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. All right. So let's start with the basics. Cybersecurity is fairly complex. It's incredibly important. How did you get into it?
So really, I got into this, if we really kind of step back, go back to basics, really it's just more on just stuff with computers. Some stuff, growing up around computers, it's kind of been part of my whole life. Really developed more of an interest in high school, being able to do more, get hands-on, just learn more things. And naturally, as you go, the cybersecurity piece came with it. But in the early days, it was really just all about, the support and everything. I was probably got into the space right as things were starting to change, where we went from what was called break fix, where you just call and do hourly reactive support, to the managed services, where things get more proactive. You're paying that, monthly fee to have kind of everything covered. And along with that, the evolution of, all the cybersecurity to kind of what we know it as today. And then now we're kind of in that next transition, which, as you alluded to, we'll be talking about here in just a little bit. So I'm actually excited to really share what that is and, how that is going to impact every business out there. But it has been a very exciting and interesting journey getting here today. So again, something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah, so passionate. Not only have you written a book, and that first book that you wrote is Mastering Computer Basics in Windows OS, yeah?
Yes, it is.
But you also have an upcoming book that focuses a little bit more on business technology. And I think, this one is evolving, right? As cybercrime evolves, the book is evolving. So what's something from the upcoming book that you think that every small business owner should be acting on right now?
Yeah, so this book I'm working on, so just some background, it is really geared for every business, really kind of going back and focusing on the business IT basics. Because over the years, working with a lot of businesses, realized and saw some patterns that there are just a lot of, foundational things that businesses aren't doing. And that's why they usually struggle a lot with their technology, or it is just not working, for their business, but usually against their business. So some things to just look out for is making sure you are standardized on certain things, like when you're buying computers, for example, you're buying business grade computers, not consumer grade. But when you are buying computers, you're buying a set standard. So you're pretty much buying the same thing. So it's easy to support, easy to maintain. And then when something goes wrong, you know quickly how to get that addressed versus having to scramble. So that's probably one of the things that we talk about. And then, of course, other things we talk about, again, the cybersecurity. We even hash out a little bit on CRMs. That's become a real big thing that we focus on for businesses too, as well as the newest thing that we'll talk about here in a bit, cyber liability management.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's chat more about cyber liability management, because I think that a lot of, especially small to medium-sized businesses, they think to themselves, I'm probably not going to get hit by a threat actor. And if I do, what's the worst that could possibly happen? And I think that they don't realize that the worst that could possibly happen is significantly worse than they imagine. So walk me through a little bit more about liability.
Yeah. So you may or may not hear about it, but really today liability is king. It is no longer necessarily just about the cybersecurity, or if you're a business and industry that has compliance regulations like HIPAA or FTC safeguards to focus on. Really, the focus is become on the liability piece of it. And even if you're in an industry that's not regulated, this actually still applies, because just like you may have heard or may not, but we say a lot with cybersecurity, it's not a matter of if, but when something's going to happen, and the same applies here. So I'll boil it down, very simple and short. So what's going on is there's something called the FTC Act Section 5. And in there, it basically stipulates how the FTC is able to regulate cybersecurity for all businesses. And this was actually upheld by a court case, FTC versus Wyndham. I'm not going to go into all the nitty-gritty details, but essentially The key takeaway from this is the FTC does have authority to essentially regulate cybersecurity for businesses in the form of, certain business practices and, how you got to be doing essentially the right thing to help, protect your consumers or your customers. Now, how this is being used against businesses is you now actually have what's called the cyber personal injury lawyer. So think about, back in the day, you probably heard a lot, ambulance chasing lawyers. Same thing, but, for the cyber version of that, essentially.
Yeah.
So anytime that a business, suffers some cyber incident or breach, a lot of times that has to be reported. And in certain states, and I can tell you for sure, Texas is one of those, they actually have a public site where those things get published in a table on that site. And a lot of times that's where these lawyers are going and they're looking for what's going on, because they're going to then turn around and want to, file suit against that business because, hey, there's some breach. Obviously, some consumer was harmed in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to protect that is to know your liability and to get ahead of that game. So it's all boils down to, are you doing what you need to do to have your evidence, your documentation, your proof? Because if you can't prove it in court, it didn't happen, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
all the lawyer has to do is make you look guilty unless you can prove otherwise. So it gets a little more complicated than that, but that's essentially kind of where we are towards helping businesses get ahead of and protect them from these things happening.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like phase one is try to prevent the incident in general. That's probably the first, try not to get hacked, right? But inevitably, there's a lot of people problems. There's no company is hack proof, right? No company is completely safe. And so I think that next step, that big thing that you're focusing on, is make sure that you're legally covered. Make sure that you can prove that you did your absolute best and that you can't be sued. I think that that's brilliant. So what kinds of companies should be working with you ideally?
So really, we can help any business out there. But when I'm out there actively prospecting and looking for businesses that I want to work with, I have 4 main industries that I focus on, and those are healthcare, legal, finance, and insurance markets. And then more specifically, I'm looking for those businesses that have between 10 to 25 users, but we can go broader from about 1 to 50 right now, kind of where we, cap out at. But that's not to say if someone, comes to us and is like, hey, we need help with XYZ, unless we can determine right off the bat that, yeah, we just can't do it, we're going to go through the process, see, okay, are we going to be a good fit for them? And if so, we'll proceed with setting that up and definitely providing that service to the business. So what I would tell any business, you're never going to be too small, to work with a provider like us, because you can't run a business today without using technology. And even if you're a solopreneur with just a computer, you do have a full IT system there that needs to be protected, because you're getting online, you've got email, you're downloading stuff, you're surfing the web, you probably have intellectual property on your machine, you probably got some customer data in your machine. All that needs to be protected, because even though you're a solo operator, you can still be solo operator and do $1 million plus in revenue, and that still makes you target. Anything really can make you target, because those cyber criminals out there, if they can get into your systems, they're going to do that because they don't know what they're going to find until they get in there.
Right.
And so I think that's one thing that I see a lot of businesses struggle with, and to realize what actually makes them a target. Well, it's just the fact you're in business, you're there, you got data out there in some capacity. Everyone is a target to some extent.
Yeah, I think a lot of small businesses think, I'm not worth it. I simply don't have the money to pay for this type of thing. There's no way that a threat actor, a cyber criminal, is going to try to get in here. But really, they don't know what they're looking for until they've found it. And yeah, you could become compromised. You could lose your business. You could end up in court. You could get sued. The risks are definitely clear and present, and and we see it all the time. But this is not just something that we talk about. That's old wives' tales or anything like that, or this is very real threats. You see small companies, you see big companies all the time dealing with these situations. So you deal with companies of all different sizes. So how do you approach tailoring the IT solutions for small businesses, for medium businesses? Each person gets their own enterprise level technology, but it needs to be affordable. How do you do this without breaking the budget for a small business?
Yeah, so to start, we have kind of like a set standard, and the way we've got everything set now is you can obviously pick your tier of service, and then with each tier there are different buckets. And obviously it's recommended, you take all the buckets as the way they're set, but understanding, budget constraints, or it's like okay, maybe we want to focus more in one area, really get that going, and then add other buckets. So we also made it very modular. And I've
Mhm.
also been kind of adjusting how we provide services because I want to bring more of these other pieces that may have typically not been attainable for businesses, such as the cyber liability management, bring some of those elements into more of the standard services so we can get businesses started on that journey. And that's something I've been working on a lot this year to make that happen because those things are key.
Mhm.
So again, we are able to work with businesses, really with almost any budget, but to understand that if you truly want to maximize this, you definitely want to be doing the managed services piece because if you're unable to afford that, yeah, there are other things we can do, but you might need to rethink a little bit on what you're doing with your business. I mean, if you're just starting out, I understand. I was in that book too.
Mhm.
Money's not necessarily going to be there because you don't have any revenue coming in yet. But there are other things that we can do to help get you started on the right path. And that kind of goes back to my book a little bit, especially the upcoming one where we're going to lay out that foundational piece. So usually the first thing I tell a business, when we come across, in fact, I'm dealing with this right now with a business partner of mine and a potential client. This person really doesn't have any revenue or the budget, but at a minimum, like, okay, well, you got to start somewhere. So step number one, go buy your domain, set up your branded business email. And I mean, literally bare bones minimum right there is what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, a lot of companies think I just don't have the budget for this type of thing. But the real question that they should be pondering is like, I really don't have the budget to have a data leak, like I really don't have the budget to have people get into my system and acquire all kinds of sensitive information, like that for a small business, that will likely be the end of your company, if after many years you manage to recover.
Yeah, and I'll put this in perspective because one of the statistics that because I literally was just looking at all this yesterday, building out kind of my deck for my podcast tomorrow, where we'll really be diving into this. Now, I think it was like it was definitely over $9 million. I can't remember if it was 9.36 or 6.63,
Yeah.
but over $9 million was the average cost. I believe that was for last year, a recent year. Basically, to deal with a cyber incident.
Hmm.
And for the 14th year in a row, that put the U.S. number one in the world in terms of that high expense, and that's not a good statistic where we want to be at. So if that tells you anything, can you afford over $9 million to keep your business going after an incident, or is it more cost effective to maybe pay a couple $1,000 a month to try and do what you can to prevent from ever getting in that position?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it's similar to healthcare. You could see a doctor, find out how to take care of your health, run the tests, make sure that your body's running okay. And if it's not, you can find things and you can fix them well in advance before they become really disadvantageous to your health, before they're full-blown diseases, before you have stage 4 cancer. But if you don't take care of your body and you say, I'll probably be okay, I hope I'll be okay, and you have a hope strategy, and 20, 30 years go by, well, you know what? You didn't take the proactive steps to take care of your health, and now you do have stuff like that. And it's the exact same for your company. If you don't take proactive steps to prevent these things in the first place, then people are going to get in there. And if you don't take steps to protect the liability, then you're probably going to be liable, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I can just hear people kind of sitting there in their chair thinking, well, this is all sounds very complicated. Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, everything is complicated if you really look at all the nitty gritty details, but you got to keep in mind you're working with someone who is going to help do a lot of this for you. So think of it almost like a white glove service.
Hmm. Hmm.
How is that going to improve your business? What is it going to do for the productivity of your business? I mean, especially if your business has employees, how often are you hearing complaints about something being slow, something not working, or I can't get to my email, or why is the internet down for the third time this week? How much is that costing your business in lost productivity and wages because your employees are just sitting there not doing anything while they wait for this to get resolved?
Yeah. I think
So,
that's a great point.
so it's going back to the proactive versus reactive. Where do you want to be?
To your point, this sounds like a huge pain in the butt, right? I don't necessarily want to learn about this technology, but wouldn't you rather learn about this technology now when you have the time to do it and you have an expert on your side than have a problem exist and then have to learn the technology retroactively and be like, okay, where did we make this mistake? How much data has been compromised? Now we're in a very bad position. That's going to be much more of a pain in the butt than doing it beforehand and learning it beforehand and being a little bit proactive about, your cyber hygiene.
Yeah, because I mean, the other thing to keep in mind in those situations, you're having to deal with whatever incident is going on. Well, then it's like, okay, well, now we got to get this in place. But at the same time, depending on the severity, in your business and industry and whatever else you may be subject to, you could potentially also have regulators now breathing down your back, looking over your shoulder, coming in, doing investigations. I mean, having an incident, the fallout could literally last for years. Because literally, there's actually a case we're going to go into,
Mhm.
and I believe this is actually related to SolarWinds. When they had this whole big deal several years ago. 5 years on, that case is still not settled. Executives are still dealing with the aftermath of that. From all the lawsuits and everything that's going on. So that's something else to keep in mind. Is it's not just, oh, we have an incident, okay, we fix it, we move on. I mean, you literally could be looking at years worth of fallout from it.
Yeah. And prior to that, maybe they couldn't be bothered. They said, yeah, sounds like a hassle. We don't necessarily want to do that. We don't necessarily want to learn how to prevent that. We'll figure it out. And
And not to keep using like scare tactics. Unfortunately, this is just actual stuff that's happening. If you actually go look at a lot of these court cases too that are going on as a result of a lot of these incidents, it's not just the company being named, but key executives. You're just because you have a business doesn't necessarily mean you're going to individually be protected if you're an exec of that company. You can be
right.
named directly in a lawsuit.
Yeah, you could be negligent, right? You could be an individual who's responsible for this downfall or at least this major problem.
Yeah, and it doesn't. You don't even have to be a big or well-known company, because there's another example that we'll show in our podcast tomorrow,
Mhm, mhm.
and I'll tell you here just kind of the tidbits of it. So it's like, what is the most obscure industry that we could think of? Okay, waste management. Well, in waste management, everyone knows the big company literally called waste management, but what about a little guy? So there's
Mhm,
actually a case for a company called, was I believe is like CR&R or something like that.
mhm.
Small little town. I mean, so small that even the CEO is driving the truck. Well, they ended up having a lawsuit, just like these big companies can, and so that it just shows that even the small guys are, just as susceptible to the same thing the big guys are.
Yeah, it's not scare tactics, but you are not personally safe and your company's not safe from being held liable. Absolutely.
I mean, this is just today's reality, but there are things that can be done, to help mitigate or reduce it. And again, as I said earlier, do you have your stuff documented? So you have your evidence, so you have your proof, to show. So if someone came knocking, even if it was simple, you got a demand letter. Well, a demand letter doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be sued, but it's showing that there's potential intent of something. So you can even potentially nip something in the bud if you got a demand letter and say, well, no, here's all our evidence, go
Yeah.
away, kind of deal. So that's
Yeah.
why that's so important.
So you offer a critical service, a number of critical services. It's very important for people to connect with you. You have a huge impact on the world in being able to essentially help these companies become healthier. So how do you connect with the right people? How do you find the ideal people who can connect with ResTech so that you can have more impact and essentially shield these people from more threat actors?
Yeah, so there's two main ways right now that we're doing that. One is just through networking and meeting people and getting introductions to other people, because that's typically right now how we probably find some of our best clients that we're working with and able to help. The
Mhm.
second is, we're out there on social media on multiple platforms, and of course, especially LinkedIn, leveraging that to connect with others, share our valuable information. Here's what's going on. Here's why it's important. Here's how we can help you. And then from there, anyone that reaches out that is interested, wants to find out if this is going to be the right fit for them, we do offer a free cybersecurity assessment for every business. If that's something of interest, would love to connect with all of y'all, be able to tell you more and walk you through that process. Because even at the end of the day, you decide we're not the best fit, I still feel good because we're leaving you with something very valuable at the end of that. You'll get a report of all of our findings and even, items. Okay, here's how you would need to, or what you would need to do to remediate, those issues that were found.
Mhm.
So again, always, really my goal is, to put good out there to help other people. Cause in turn, I know when we do that, good will eventually come back to us.
Fully believe that karmic effect of business is, if you just go in being genuine and try to be helpful and be of service and solve a genuine problem, you're going to be rewarded. Yeah, absolutely.
Yesterday was the best time to take action. Today is the second best time to do it. So definitely reach out, have that consultation. The best time to do that is when nothing's going on, when you think everything's working. Because I can guarantee you, we always find something that needs to be addressed or fixed, and the business may not be aware of it. So definitely, again, that's why we do that free assessment, because we know there's always going to be stuff businesses need to be aware of and address. We want to make sure that does get taken care of, because when we all become more secure as a business community as a whole, we are that much more secure because we are all interdependent upon one another.
Now, for all of the viewers, for all of the listeners of the podcast, those links are going to be right down below. You can connect with David. You can connect with ResTech Solutions. You can get that free audit. Check them out. Give them a chance to see what they can find, see how they can help you out. David, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. I appreciate your expertise.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it as well.